The air conditioning at Norfolk Scope was fighting a losing battle against the July heat. It was July 22nd, 1975, and outside the arena, the temperature had climbed past 90 degrees. Inside, 12,000 bodies generated their own weather system. A humidity of anticipation that the industrial cooling units couldn't quite manage. Backstage, Elvis Presley sat alone in a dressing room that could have belonged to anyone. Beige walls, a mirror rimmed with lights, half of them burned out, a couch that had seen better decades. He was 40 years old, though the number felt abstract, disconnected from the face staring back at him from the glass. The face was puffy, the eyes were tired. The famous hair, still dark and swept back, seemed to belong to someone else, someone younger, someone who still believed. He had been on the road for nearly 2 weeks. Terre Haute, Cleveland, Charleston, Springfield, Nassau, each city blurring into the next, each arena looking exactly like the last, each crowd expecting the same thing, the legend, the spectacle, the king. Night after night, he walked onto stages across America and became what they needed him to be. But the cost of that transformation was growing heavier. Tonight felt different, though he couldn't name why. There was a weight in his chest that had nothing to do with the white jumpsuit waiting on its hanger. The weight was older than the costume. It was the weight of years, of a mother buried 17 summers ago, of a marriage that had ended 2 years prior, of a daughter growing up in a world he barely recognized. He thought about Lisa Marie often on nights like this. She was 7 now, the same age he had been when everything changed. He wondered what she thought of him, whether she saw the man or the myth. A knock on the door. Charlie Hodge, his oldest friend on the road, leaned in. 20 minutes, E. Elvis nodded. He didn't speak. Charlie understood. The door closed, and Elvis was alone again with his reflection. He closed his eyes and tried to find the place inside himself where the music lived. That was the secret no one ever talked about, that performing wasn't about technique or even talent. It was about finding that reservoir of feeling and drawing from it night after night until you wondered if there was anything left. Tonight, the reservoir felt shallow, but the show would go on. It always did. In the arena, 12,000 people waited. They had driven from Norfolk and Virginia Beach, from Richmond and Newport News, from small towns whose names would never appear in headlines. They had saved their money and taken time off work and dressed in their finest clothes, not because they expected to meet Elvis Presley, but because seeing him felt like an event that demanded reverence. Among them, in the third row, sat Margaret Holloway and her daughter, Sarah. Margaret was 43. She worked as a secretary at a law firm in Hampton, typing documents and answering phones for partners who never remembered her name. She had been widowed 2 years ago when her husband David died of a heart attack at breakfast on an ordinary Tuesday morning. The randomness of it still haunted her, the way life could change between one heartbeat and the next. Sarah was 8 years old. She had David's chin and Margaret's smile and eyes that saw nothing. She had been born blind. The doctors had a name for it, something involving the optic nerve that Margaret could never quite remember. But the name didn't matter. What mattered was that Sarah had never seen the sun rise over the Chesapeake Bay, had never watched her mother's face light up when she laughed, had never witnessed color, the blue of a summer sky, the green of grass after rain. What Sarah had was sound. She heard the world in ways that sighted people couldn't imagine. She could identify birds by their songs. She could tell when her mother was sad by the slight change in her breathing. She could find her way through their small house by the echoes her footsteps made, and she had Elvis. Margaret wasn't sure when it started, when her daughter's relationship with the music became something deeper. Perhaps it was after David died, when grief had turned their house into a quiet place. Sarah had found an old record player in the garage, and somehow figured out how to work it. The first record she played was Love Me Tender. She must have listened to it 50 times that first week, lying on the floor with her ear pressed to the speaker, as if trying to climb inside the sound. "Why do you like him so much?" Margaret had asked once. Sarah thought about it for a long time. "Because when he sings, I can see." Margaret hadn't understood, but she also hadn't questioned it. In the years since David's death, She had learned that understanding wasn't always necessary. Sometimes love was enough. The concert tickets had cost more than Margaret could afford. But when Sarah's birthday approached, there was never any question. She had driven to Norfolk alone, waited 4 hours at the Scope box office, and purchased 2 seats in the third row. She told Sarah nothing until that morning. Sarah had cried. Not sad tears, overwhelmed tears. The tears of someone given something they never dared hope for. Now they sat in the darkness, waiting. Margaret watched her daughter's face. Sarah was perfectly still. Her useless eyes turned toward the stage as if she could see it. Every few seconds, her lips moved silently. She was counting, the way she always counted when nervous. The orchestra began. The crowd rose, and then, in a moment that seemed to bend physics, he was there. Elvis walked onto the stage like a man stepping into his own dream. The white jumpsuit caught the lights and threw them back in fractured rainbows. The cape swirled. His face, even from the third row, seemed impossibly alive, radiating energy that the years and the miles couldn't quite extinguish. Sarah's hand found her mother's and squeezed hard. "He's here," Margaret whispered, though she knew Sarah didn't need to be told. The girl's entire body had changed, tensed, and relaxed simultaneously, like a plant turning toward sunlight. Elvis launched into CC Rider, and the arena erupted. The sound was enormous, a wall of noise that would have overwhelmed most performers. But Elvis fed on it. He moved across the stage with ease that belied his 40 years, his hips swaying, his voice cutting through chaos like a knife through water. Sarah stood on her seat to hear better. Margaret led her. This was different. This was sacred ground. The show continued. "I got a woman. Love me. If you love me." All shook up. Elvis worked through his catalog like a master painter revisiting his greatest works. But Margaret noticed something else. Between songs, when Elvis spoke to the audience or took a sip of water, there were moments when the mask slipped, just briefly. She saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight of being watched by thousands who wanted something from him, needed something from him. She recognized that look. It was the same look she saw in her own mirror some mornings. The face of someone who kept going because stopping wasn't an option. Midway through the show, Elvis began handing out scarves. This was tradition. Silk scarves he wore around his neck, then pressed to his face, then handed to women in the front rows. The gesture was intimate and theatrical. The women surged forward, reaching, hoping, calling his name. Elvis moved along the edge of the stage, distributing scarves with practiced grace. And then he stopped. He was directly in front of Sarah. Later, Margaret would try to reconstruct what happened. She would tell the story dozens of times over the following years to friends, to family, to anyone who would listen. But the words never quite captured it. Some moments resist language. What she remembered was this. Elvis had been moving along the stage, reaching toward outstretched hands, when his eyes found Sarah. The girl was standing on her seat, face turned upward, not reaching for anything, because she didn't know there was anything to reach for. Her arms hung at her sides. Her expression was one of pure listening, head tilted, lips parted, every fiber of her being focused on sound. Elvis froze. The band kept playing for a few bars before realizing something had changed. The music stumbled, then stopped. The arena fell into uncertain silence. 12,000 people held their breath. Elvis handed his microphone to someone. Then he knelt. Not the performative kneeling of stage gestures, not dramatic posture. He knelt the way you kneel when you're praying, when you're trying to make yourself smaller, less frightening, more human. He reached out and took Sarah's hands. The girl didn't flinch. She had known he was there before he touched her. Known by the change in the air, the displacement of space. Her fingers curled around his, and her lips moved. "Mr. Presley." No one else could hear. The arena was silent, but it was the silence of distance, the crowd too far away to catch the words. Even Margaret, standing 2 feet away, could barely make them out. Elvis said something back. His voice was soft, stripped of performer's projection. This was not the king speaking. This was just a man, a tired man, a lonely man. A man kneeling before a blind child in an arena full of people who wanted to see a legend. "I can't see you," Sarah said. "But I can see your music." Margaret watched Elvis's face collapse. Not dramatically. The collapse was internal. Something shifted behind his eyes. The mask didn't just slip. It shattered. He pulled a scarf from around his neck. Blue silk. He pressed it to his lips. Then slowly, deliberately, he raised it to Sarah's face. He touched her eyes with it. Both eyes. One at a time. The silk brushing against closed lids with the gentleness of prayer. No one in the arena could hear what he whispered. But Margaret heard. She would remember those words for the rest of her life. "I see you too." The moment lasted perhaps 30 seconds. It felt like 30 years. Then Elvis stood. He retrieved his microphone. He looked out at the 12,000 people who had been watching without understanding what they were witnessing. He didn't explain. Some things couldn't be explained. "I want to sing something," he said. His voice was rough, different. The performance polish was gone, replaced by something rawer. "For a young lady I just met." He turned to his band. A few quiet words. They nodded. The orchestra settled into a familiar introduction. "Love Me Tender." But this version was different. Stripped down. Just Elvis and his guitar player and a single piano. The big band arrangements fell away, replaced by something simpler, purer. He sang it directly to Sarah, his body angled toward the third row, his eyes fixed on this child who couldn't see him but could hear everything he was trying to say. Margaret realized she was crying. So were the women around her. So were men in the back rows, who would later pretend they hadn't been affected. The arena had become a church, and Elvis Presley was conducting a service no one had expected. When the song ended, there was silence, then applause. Not the wild screaming of before, but something different, something that acknowledged what had happened. Elvis continued the show. The energy had changed. He seemed more present now, more connected, as if the encounter with Sarah had reminded him of something he'd forgotten, why he'd started singing in the first place. The concert ended with "Can't Help Falling in Love," as it always did. But even this felt different. Less theatrical, more true. Backstage afterward, something unusual happened. Normally, Elvis retreated immediately after a performance. The energy required left him depleted, needing time alone. But tonight, he found Charlie Hodge and said 2 words. "The girl." Charlie understood. He always understood. 10 minutes later, Margaret and Sarah found themselves standing in a corridor backstage, waiting for something they hadn't requested. The door opened. Elvis appeared. He looked different up close. Smaller than the stage had made him seem, but also more present, more real. The sweat hadn't fully dried. His eyes were bloodshot. His hands, when he reached out to take Sarah's again, trembled slightly. "What's your name?" "Sarah." "Sarah Holloway." "Sarah." He said it like he was memorizing it. "You said something to me out there. You said you can see my music. What does it look like?" The question seemed to surprise her. She thought for a long moment. "It looks like colors," Sarah said. "But not regular colors. Colors that have feelings in them. When you sing sad songs, it's blue. But not cold blue, warm blue, like a blanket. And when you sing fast songs, it's red and orange, but they're happy colors. They dance." Elvis's breath caught. "And Love Me Tender? What color is that?" "Gold," Sarah said without hesitation. "It's always gold. Like sunshine feels on your face. Like something you want to hold on to, but can't quite catch." Elvis's eyes filled with tears. He didn't try to hide them. He just knelt again, this same humbling posture, and let them fall. "You know something, Sarah? I think you might be the first person who's ever really heard what I was trying to say." He stayed with them for almost half an hour. No cameras, no reporters, no handlers. Just Elvis, and this mother, and her blind daughter, talking about music and color, and what it means to see without eyes. Before they left, Elvis removed something from his finger. A ring, not one of his famous pieces. Not giant diamonds or flashy gold. A simple band with a small turquoise stone. His mother's ring, He had worn it for 17 years, ever since Gladys died. "I want you to have this," he said to Sarah. "I can't," Margaret started. "Please." Elvis's voice was quiet, tired, but certain. "She gave me something tonight. I'd like to give her something back." He pressed the ring into Sarah's palm, closed her fingers around it. "You keep seeing the colors, Sarah. You keep seeing the music. Because you're right. That's where the real seeing happens. Not with eyes, with something deeper." Then he was gone. The drive home was quiet. Sarah sat in the passenger seat, the ring clutched in both hands, occasionally bringing it to her face to feel its shape. It was nearly midnight when they pulled into their driveway in Hampton. The house looked the same as it had that morning, but something felt different. As Margaret helped her daughter out of the car, Sarah spoke. "Mom?" "Yes, baby. I think he needed to see me too." Margaret stopped. The words hung in the night air. "What do you mean?" Sarah was quiet for a moment, holding the ring, her face turned toward a sky full of stars she couldn't see. "He was tired," she said. I could hear it in his voice. Not sleepy tired. Tired like he forgot why he was doing what he was doing. Tired like he couldn't remember who he really was. Margaret waited. "But when he sang to me, when he really sang, just to me, he remembered." I could hear it. He remembered that the music isn't about the big crowds or the screaming. It's about the colors. It's about making people feel less alone. She turned toward her mother, her sightless eyes somehow more knowing than any eyes that could see. "I think I helped him remember. That's why he gave me the ring. Not because he was being nice, because we gave each other something." Margaret knelt then, just as Elvis had knelt, and wrapped her arms around her daughter in the darkness of their ordinary driveway, on what had become an extraordinary night. "I think you're right," she whispered. "I think that's exactly what happened." The years that followed would not be kind to Elvis Presley. His health would deteriorate. On August 16, 1977, just 2 years after that night in Norfolk, he would die at Graceland at the age of 42. The news hit Margaret like a physical blow. She thought immediately of Sarah, of the ring, of the man who had knelt before her daughter, and wept because a blind child had described his music in terms of color. She drove to Sarah's school and pulled her out of class. They went home and played Elvis records for the rest of the day, not talking, just listening. Sarah wore the turquoise ring on a chain around her neck, where it had hung every day since that July night. "He's not really gone," Sarah said as evening fell. "The colors are still there. In the music, they'll always be there." Sarah Holloway grew up. She became a music therapist, one of the first blind music therapists in Virginia, specializing in working with children who had disabilities or trauma. She would tell them about the night Elvis Presley sang to her, not about the fame or the spectacle, about the moment when a tired man remembered why he made music. The ring remained with her always. When she died in 2019 at 52, it was still around her neck. Her instructions were for it to be returned to Graceland. Her accompanying letter was simple. "This ring belonged to Gladys Presley. Elvis gave it to me on July 20th, 1975, after I told him what his music looked like. Please put it somewhere visitors can see it. And if anyone asks its story, tell them it's about two people who saw each other clearly, even though one of them was blind and the other was buried under years of being seen by millions without ever being truly seen at all. Every now and then, a visitor to Graceland will stand near Elvis's grave and wonder about the man buried there. They will think about the hits, the movies, the jumpsuits, and the tragedy of his early death. They will see the artifacts and gold records. Few will know about Sarah Holloway. Few will ever hear the story of a July night in 1975 when a tired man knelt before a blind girl and remembered what music was for. But the story exists. It happened, and in that happening, something true was revealed. Something about fame and loneliness and the ways that human beings can save each other. Briefly, unexpectedly, in moments the world never witnesses. Elvis Presley was many things. Icon, legend, king. But on that night in Norfolk, for those few minutes, he was just a man who was tired of being seen and desperate to be understood. A man who found, in the unlikely person of an 8-year-old blind girl, someone who could hear beyond the surface of his voice. She called it colors. He called it being seen. It was, perhaps, the same thing. And sometimes, when the world gets very quiet, you can almost hear the echo of it. A gold sound, warm and gentle, reaching across the decades like a hand reaching for another hand in darkness, asking only to be held, to be known, to be, for one moment, truly seen.